The very air at Sun Valley Shooting Range seemed to thicken with unspoken judgment the moment Danielle Foster stepped through its doors in Mesa, Arizona. She wasn't clad in the usual tactical boots or a flashy, patch-laden jacket. No sleek, custom rifle case adorned her side, nor did designer sunglasses perch atop her head. Just Danielle, her scuffed sneakers, a faded gray hoodie that had seen countless better days, and a soft green backpack slung casually over her shoulder were her only companions. The range itself was a symphony of oil and gunpowder punctuated by the rhythmic, sharp reports echoing off concrete. Most patrons were absorbed in their targets, yet a few heads inevitably swiveled her way. The looks weren't openly hostile, but they held that telltale, tight little smirk. The kind people wear when they've already written your story based on a single glance. Danielle kept her gaze lowered, making her way towards an empty lane nestled further back. With practiced, deliberate movements, she unzipped her bag, revealing an old bolt-action rifle. It was anything but shiny or new. The worn wood of its stock seemed etched with 1,000 silent tales. At the counter, a tall man, hidden mostly by a ball cap and a neatly trimmed beard, leaned in to conspiratorially whisper to another regular. His voice, however, carried just a little too far, slicing through the general din of the range. "New girl?" he chuckled, nudging his companion. "Looks like she brought a museum piece." Their laughter followed, unashamed and undisguised. Danielle heard them, every word, but not a muscle in her face flinched. With slow, steady hands, she loaded a few rounds. She knew places like this. She knew these types of people even better. If they expected a mere spectacle, they were about to be truly surprised. The real show, after all, was just about to begin. The first shot she fired tore through the air, clean, sharp, and remarkably steady. It wasn't loud or dramatic, simply a neat, precise hole punched dead center on the target. Most people didn't even register it amidst their own shooting, but one person did. A younger man, probably in his mid-20s, clad in a bright red flannel shirt, leaned over from the adjacent lane, a smirk spreading across his face as if sharing a private joke no one had asked for. "Nice shot, Grandma," he called out, his voice carrying far enough for several nearby shooters to hear. Danielle didn't even grant him a glance. Her calm hands chambered another round, and she squeezed off a second shot. Another bullseye. Still, she remained silent. Talking had never truly taken her anywhere worth going. She would let them think whatever they pleased. Behind her, the whispers began to coalesce, soft at first, then growing louder as more eyes turned her way. A woman in a tactical vest nudged her friend, a suppressed laugh escaping her lips. "You think she even knows what she's doing? Probably watched a YouTube video before she got here." Her friend chimed in. "Maybe she thinks it's like bowling," a chuckle following. Danielle, however, stayed perfectly locked in, oblivious to the rising tide of mockery. Breath in, exhale, a smooth pull of the trigger. One hole after another appeared on her target, each so close to the last they almost touched. The small, stocky man with a clipboard, clearly the range manager by the commanding way he barked orders, spotted the tiny crowd beginning to form near her lane. Adjusting his hat, he strode purposefully over, wearing a grin that was trying just a little too hard. "You new here?" he boomed, louder than strictly necessary. Danielle offered a small nod, her gaze unwavering from her target. "First time here?" he pressed, a chuckle rumbling in his chest, clearly disbelieving. "Well, we're holding," Little friendly competition today. You're welcome to sign up if you want, you know, for fun. There it was, the challenge, thinly veiled as an invitation. Danielle quietly clicked the safety on her rifle and leaned it against the booth wall. "Maybe," she replied, her voice calm and even. The man offered a tight, dismissive smile before turning and walking back towards the front desk, already having written her off in his mind. But as Danielle reached for the pen to add her name to the sign-up sheet, the very atmosphere in the room began to subtly shift. The sign-up sheet was unassuming, adorned with a handful of scribbled names, mostly regulars, mostly men, the kind who carried themselves with the unspoken certainty of victory. Danielle held the pen for a moment longer than necessary, the cheap plastic feeling unfamiliar between her fingers. She hadn't competed in anything since her time in the Army. She hadn't even touched a rifle outside her workroom in almost 3 years. "You don't have to prove anything," she told herself. "You didn't come here for this." But then, she heard it again, the low hum of laughter from the flannel-shirted man and his friends. "Bet she can't even hit the broadside of a barn," he muttered, making no effort to lower his voice. Danielle pressed the pen harder against the paper than she intended, scrawling her name boldly across the bottom of the list. "Danielle Foster?" The man with the clipboard confirmed, reading her name as she handed the sheet back to him. "You sure about that, ma'am?" "I'm sure," she said simply. The man gave a small shrug, the kind that conveys a patronizing indulgence, as if he were doing her a favor by humoring her. "All right. We'll call your name when it's your turn. Good luck out there." Danielle returned to her booth and began meticulously checking over her rifle. It was an old friend to her, battered but utterly reliable, a tool that had once been an extension of her every breath, every heartbeat. As she meticulously wiped down the scope with a soft cloth, an older woman with salt and pepper hair, one of the rare few not smirking, paused at the lane beside her. "You any good, honey?" she asked in a low, conspiratorial voice. Danielle offered a small, knowing half-smile. "Used to be?" The woman chuckled, not unkindly. "Well, sometimes used to be is just sleeping, not gone." Danielle nodded once, tucking that line into her back pocket like a lucky coin. The intercom crackled to life above them. "All right, folks, gather up. Competition's about to start." Targets were swiftly reset. Rifles were being given last-minute cleanings. People were stretching their arms, prepping as if for a boxing match. Danielle closed her eyes for a brief second. She could almost smell the red dust of Afghanistan, hear the urgent calls in her earpiece, feel the bone-deep ache of her old life. But when she opened her eyes, all she saw was a clean, still paper target waiting at 100 yards. As she tightened the strap of her gloves, Danielle knew this wasn't just about a prize. It was about something she hadn't let herself feel in years. The crowd bunched up near the benches, their energy buzzing like a soda can ready to pop. A young employee in a navy polo shirt grabbed a clipboard and called out the first name. "Jason Weller, you're up!" The man in the red flannel, Jason, winked at Danielle as he swaggered past. "Watch and learn, sweetheart," he murmured. He strode to the firing line, twirling his semi-automatic rifle with a flourish for show. His shots rang out, fast and loud, punching through the targets with decent accuracy. The regulars clapped and hollered after he finished, high-fiving him as he strutted back to his seat. The next few shooters performed adequately. Some better, some worse. Nobody extraordinary, just enough swagger to keep the noise alive. Danielle kept her head down, meticulously cleaning the bore of her rifle one more time, checking every screw, every seam. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't even angry. She just wanted it done. Then her name sliced through the chatter, called out over the speaker. Danielle Foster! The room didn't exactly fall silent, but the sound dipped, that subtle drop you feel just before something truly important happens. Danielle stood, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. Her scuffed sneakers made small, steady sounds against the concrete as she walked to the line. Bet she doesn't even know how to load it, Jason scoffed, laughing with his buddies. Someone else mimicked fumbling hands, pretending to drop an invisible rifle. Danielle didn't say a word. She calmly placed her rifle down, adjusted the scope, and settled into her stance. It was automatic, a profound muscle memory from years she rarely allowed herself to recall. The rules were simple. 5 shots, moving targets, fast pace, points for accuracy and speed. Whenever you're ready, the employee called out. Danielle inhaled through her nose, letting the breath out slowly. The world tunneled down. The laughter, the chatter, the flashing cameras, it all blurred into an indistinguishable hum. The first target zipped across from left to right. Danielle squeezed the trigger. One shot, dead center. The second target jerked upward. Another shot, straight through its heart. By the third target, the entire range had fallen utterly silent. No more jokes. No more snickers. Fourth, fifth. Every bullet found its mark with a grace so effortless it almost looked fake. When she finished, Danielle clicked the safety back on and stepped away from the booth as casually as if she were setting down a coffee cup. No celebration, no grand reaction. The manager cleared his throat awkwardly at the front. Highest score so far, he mumbled, glancing at the digital display that showed a near-perfect score. Jason stared, his mouth hanging open. His buddies shifted uncomfortably, suddenly finding every peeling paint spot on the walls fascinating. Danielle didn't gloat, didn't even crack a smile. She simply picked up her rifle, slung it back over her shoulder, and headed for the benches without a single glance at anyone. But even as she sat back down, she knew the real silence was just beginning. And it was louder than any gunshot could ever be. The next few shooters came and went, but nobody was really paying attention anymore. Not after Danielle. Every loud bang that missed, every target that wobbled instead of dropped clean, just made the room feel heavier. Folks who'd laughed earlier now watched Danielle from the corners of their eyes, not with mockery, but with a strange, uncomfortable kind of curiosity. Jason Weller sat stiffly on the bench beside his friends, his jaw clenched so hard you could see the muscles twitch. Every now and then he threw a furtive glance at Danielle, as if trying to decipher who or what he had just witnessed. Danielle sat still, her legs crossed at the ankle, hands folded loosely in her lap. Her rifle leaned against the wall beside her, almost an afterthought. A woman wearing a pink camo hat walked up, holding 2 coffees. "You want one?" she asked hesitantly, extending a cup. Danielle looked up, offered a polite smile, and shook her head. "Thanks, but I'm good." The woman bobbed her head quickly and scurried off, her cheeks flushing red. She hadn't offered coffee to anyone else. The final names were called. The leaderboard blinked on the screen behind the front counter, rows of scores neatly stacked. Danielle's name sat at the very top. A clean, cold fact staring everyone in the face. The manager walked to the center of the range, clipboard in hand, trying to sound enthusiastic. "All right, looks like our winner today is Danielle Foster." He clapped a little too fast. A few others joined in, their applause awkward, unsure whether to cheer or apologize. Danielle stood and walked forward. No swagger, no smug grin. The prize was a gift card and a cheap plastic trophy. She took them both with a small nod, tucking them into her backpack as if they were grocery receipts. Someone from the back, probably one of Jason's friends, mumbled under his breath. She must have gotten lucky. Danielle turned her head slightly, finally speaking loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Luck doesn't group shots like that." There was a flicker, just a flicker of the old fire in her voice, the fire that used to ignite when it truly mattered. Nobody laughed this time. Nobody dared. But deep down, Danielle knew the questions had only just begun. And some of these people wouldn't be able to stop wondering. The crowd thinned out fast after that. Some packed up their rifles in tight silence. Others offered Danielle awkward nods as they slipped past her, as if she were some living legend. They weren't sure how to approach. Danielle didn't rush. She sat on the bench, wiping down her rifle with slow, deliberate movements. She could feel the tension swirling in the room, the way people stole glances, the way conversations fizzled out when she got too close. Jason lingered near the lockers, pretending to dig through his duffel bag. He kept peeking over, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't quite swallow his pride. Finally, he pushed off the wall and walked towards her. His boots scuffed loudly against the floor. "You military?" he asked, his voice tight with a mixture of awe and reluctant respect. Danielle didn't look up immediately. "Something like that." Jason shifted awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. You shoot like someone who's been doing it a long time." Danielle finally met his eyes. There was no anger there, no lingering spite, just a steady, unblinking calm. "Long enough," she said. Jason opened his mouth as if to press further, perhaps to ask what unit, where she served, how many tours? But something in Danielle's face conveyed that he wouldn't get any answers he truly deserved. Instead, he cleared his throat and muttered, "Good shooting," before slinking. Back to his friends. Danielle finished packing up, slid her rifle back into the battered green case, and zipped it shut. The old woman from earlier, the one who'd offered the coffee, gave her a little wink as she passed by. "Told you," she said softly. "Sleeping. Not gone." Danielle allowed herself a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. She swung the backpack over her shoulder and headed toward the parking lot. The late afternoon sun was brutal, baking the blacktop into shimmering waves of heat. Danielle didn't mind. She welcomed the weight of the heat pressing down. As she reached her car, a beat-up dark blue Honda Civic, a voice called out behind her. "Ma'am!" It was the range manager jogging to catch up, his clipboard flapping against his side. "You ever think about competing professionally?" he asked, panting slightly. "We've got connections. There are tournaments, big money, real opportunity." Danielle smiled politely, unlocking her car door. "Not interested," she said. "Are you sure?" he pressed. "I mean, with your skills—" Danielle shook her head slowly. "I didn't come here to prove anything to anybody." She slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and let the soft rumble wash over her. As she pulled away, she glanced once in the rearview mirror. The shooting range grew smaller until it disappeared in the shimmering heat. And just like that, Danielle Foster melted back into the ordinary world. No medals, no headlines, no applause. Just a quiet woman carrying the weight of a life most people could never begin to understand. But somewhere deep inside, she knew today wasn't really about winning. It was about remembering who she still was, even after all this time. The road stretched out ahead, long and open, the desert sun painting everything in hard gold and soft shadows. Danielle tapped her fingers lightly against the steering wheel, letting the rhythm steady her heartbeat. She wasn't mad at the people back there. Not really. They didn't know her story. They didn't know about the years she spent crawling through dirt and concrete. Heart pounding in her ears, waiting for a command she sometimes prayed wouldn't come. They didn't know about the lives she had to take, the ones she couldn't save, the promises she made in the silence afterward, when nobody else was looking. Danielle didn't blame them for making assumptions based on what they could see. The truth was, most people only understood what sat right in front of them. But every now and then, it felt good to remind the world that strength doesn't always look like armor, and real skill, the kind you can't fake, doesn't need permission to exist. At a red light, Danielle watched a father teaching his daughter how to ride a bike in the parking lot of a strip mall. The girl wobbled and nearly tipped over, but her dad caught her, laughing. Danielle smiled to herself. She'd done enough fighting for one lifetime. Now it was time to live small, live quiet, and find peace in the everyday things that didn't make headlines. She turned the corner, heading toward home. Her little apartment with the creaky floors, the overgrown plant on the balcony, and the book she'd left half-finished on the kitchen table awaited her. The cheap plastic trophy from the range clattered lightly in her back seat with every bump in the road, forgotten already. It didn't mean much. It never did. But the feeling she carried home, the quiet fire rekindled inside her, that was something nobody could take. Because no matter how much the world underestimated her, Danielle Foster knew exactly who she was. And that was enough. And maybe, just maybe, somebody at that range would remember her the next time they thought they had someone all figured out. Never judge someone's strength by what you see on the surface. Real power often moves quietly without asking for recognition. If you enjoyed this story, share it with someone who might need a reminder that real strength doesn't need to shout. Stay humble, stay sharp, and never forget who you are.